bit about marketing, which I know for every single one of us is important. Everything is marketing. Our products are important, our services are important, the experiences we create are important. But without marketing, without a brand voice, and without authenticity, can't really go very far. And so we have three incredible marketers here today. We have Erika Decker, the global head of brand relevance and integration at Uber. We have Noria, head of influencer partnerships and collaborations at Target. And we have Maryellis Bunn, the founder of the phenomenon that is the Museum of Ice Cream. And so I'd love for you each to talk about how you would describe what you do, because titles are nice, but like what is your job? Let's start with Erika.
I mean, I'm going to say I'm like a cultural anthropologist who tries to help Uber understand what's our role in culture, how should we be showing up as a brand, as a product, as a service, in a way that's beyond just the functionality of getting from point A to point B. So I spent a lot of time understanding trends, what's going on in digital, what are the, I guess, emerging things that we need to be aware of as a brand and a business. And then I try to translate that in ways that become actionable for product teams, for marketing teams, turning that into, stories, campaigns, and work we could put into market that's going to create really strong hearts and minds, emotional connections with people that use us on a day-to-day basis, or hopefully people that want to use us on a day-to-day basis.
So I lead all the collaborations and influencer marketing for Target. What that means is I'm always on the hunt for the next big story. As I said, I came from an editorial background, and that is what I do. I am a storyteller. I look for those compelling people, individuals or brands or designers who I think could add value to Target, but also to our guests. And I would say that's the fun part, and then the other part is wrangling and making sure that these stories actually come to life in a way that we could be proud of and that maybe surprise and delight people.
I build experiences. We have one mission, and that is to connect humans to other humans and to inspire imagination.
So when we think about traditional marketing, we think big budget, splashy ads, and shows like Mad Men, right? And obviously that's not quite accurate today. And the rate at which this business has changed is dramatic. What are the most meaningful shifts in the landscape that you've seen in the past 2 or 3 years, and what used to work that doesn't work anymore?
I think we've seen a shift in the last 2 or 3 years. We've started, especially in the onset of social media, with this drive for perfection, highly curated content that feels at this level that is not achievable. And we've seen this shift into a radical need for transparency, a desire for brands to be not only authentic, but to be vulnerable, and for brands to not only, you can no longer just say, you have to do. We call it show, not tell, and I think that's a shift that we will continue to see in the years to come. What about you guys?
I mean, I would certainly say, as coming from someone who is a legacy marketer, I mean, Target is famous for TV ads, and we still continue to do TV ads. So what I think has been a big shift for us, as we've seen, is really focusing on how do we talk to like 300 million people in a really like one-on-one way, which means approaching our marketing completely differently. And just a quick story on that. I had a collaboration, and I told our media team, we're not going to do any TV commercial. And they were like, what do you mean, no TV? And I was like, no, we really aren't going to do TV. We're actually going to throw a giant festival, and we're just going to capture content there and put it out on social. And like, it was such a hard thing for them to understand. And I think just for that, for companies that have been around for a long time, it's a really hard shift to realize that just going like without some mass blanket of a voice, but actually being able to touch people one-on-one, that can be the most compelling message of all.
Radical transparency, like +1 to that. And then yes to the brand doesn't control the brand anymore. So I think the thing that's been really hard for businesses to get their heads around is like your brand story actually doesn't belong to you, and the narrative is not yours to control. And so what we've been focusing on is how do we create stories through experiences? And clearly a lot of you are having one of those experiences right now. And so the intent would be to put something out into the world that's going to be worthy of you wanting to take your social channels or just evangelize it on behalf of the brands, because that's going to be even more authentic and credible anyways. I think it's like ads are only 6% trusted, and so we never want to do ads, and storytelling is sometimes advertising in sheep's clothing. So we spend a lot of time thinking through how we would create something that's worthy of other people evangelizing on our behalf.
So Maryellis, in 2016, you launched the Museum of Ice Cream as a temporary installation in New York City, and it's since grown into a nationwide sensation. You've welcomed more than 1 million visitors. Is it like,
Yeah, I feel like we're almost about to hit 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like it's, I'm not sure about this statistic because it's definitely more. And you have your own line of ice cream, among other products. Why do you think it's become such a phenomenon, and why ice cream?
So when we started Museum of Ice Cream, it came out of this. I moved to New York City about 8 years ago, and when I moved here, I was extremely lonely. I was in a space of like real despair. I didn't know how an avenue went north and south, or a street went south, east and west, and so what I did is I started to go to these ice cream shops. And it was inside these local ice cream shops I started to get my footing of the city, and I was able to talk to people. And what I so desired was to have a visceral connection with other humans, and was looking for an environment to be able to have that take place. So that was kind of the antithesis of why ice cream is universal. Who here likes ice cream? Hallelujah.
You can't be crying and eating ice cream at the same time.
Well, you can, because like have you ever like gone through a breakup and like on the couch and like
yeah, I guess so. Maybe not a cone.
So that was the thing. Like I was like, I want to be able to build places for humans to come and be able to experience other humans. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? So I went back to those days and like my real deep despair, and was like, what got me through it? And that was ice cream. And that's how Museum of Ice Cream got started.
Why do you think it's become such a phenomenon?
We are so bored. When we looked at it, so I graduated college, I had my first job, and I was like, what do I do after work? There was like one option. You can either go to a bar, or you can go home and you can watch Netflix, or there really wasn't another answer. And at the time I was like, I have to build something that doesn't exist, that we can just go to for the sake of having fun. And I think that's why it's, the phenomenon that it has become.
So I know you guys both collaborated, Noria and Maryellis.
We did, we're friends
right,
now.
on the launch of Museum of Ice Cream Pint Shop. Is that what you call it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's maybe Noria can take, because it's far more complex. Our target partnership was threefold. So we first launched a kids collection, both boys and girls, and we launched our ice cream nationwide at all 1,800 Target stores. And then Target was our headline sponsor for our pint shop.
And so, Noria, what is it that drew you to that? What is the essence of what you look for in a partnership or in an influencer activation?
Sure. I always say it has to be like the most compelling story. And with Museum of Ice Cream, I went like right when they had opened. And we were just struck by this like emotional truth. Like, it was surprising. So I always look for an element of surprise, like what I wouldn't expect, whether it is a museum like dedicated to this love and joy around ice cream, to maybe an influencer who is doing something that I would never anticipate or expect, or speaking in a different way. So it's that element of surprise, it's that unique point of view, and Museum of Ice Cream had it. They also have a really strong and defined aesthetic, and I look for that because it's like, well, they could have done it and it could have been really, not thought through. It benefited from Maryellis' like tremendous vision and creativity and sense of optimism that came through. And I was like, this is just like a perfect match for what we're doing. And the reason that we thought it made sense for a kids collection is because it's like aesthetically just a natural fit. There was a defined point of view, and we had never played with this idea of that brand before in the kids space, but we felt like the message was really strong. And so I would say I look for a point of differentiation from anything else, because we are bombarded all the time with these options to partner with different brands or people or designers, and we look for the story that feels the most true for what we're trying to do.
So Erika, your title is Global Head of Brand Relevance. How do you continue to build relevance once you've achieved scale and your company's name has actually become synonymous with the service you're providing? You Google things and you Uber somewhere. So how do you continue building relevance?
Good question. I'm constantly trying to figure that out myself. Brand relevance was a moniker we had to kind of call ourselves just to even differentiate who we were as a team and how we would be thinking and behaving differently from the way the organization had grown up. Probably not a lot of you know that Uber is 7 years old, and it's kind of like this ubiquitous, you can't imagine life without it, and it's also created the gig economy itself. So imagine not having the ability to press a button, get food or a ride today. You just can't even fathom that. So it's okay, now that we've created this massive differentiation, created this new industry, created this new way to have things come to you or for you to get to things, what does that mean in a bigger context? Because we've become this really big brand. People were letting us know they didn't really understand what our values were, and what we understand about millennials and even next generation is you have to stand for something bigger than what your functionality is. And so what we try to do on a day-to-day basis is understand who are the customers we serve, what are the things that they need help from brand with ubiquitous reach and scale like what Uber has. And we try to create experiences that are going to remove barriers for them in the same way we've removed barriers from the way that mobility works today. So one way we've done that with Sophia is Uber Pitch. And so hopefully you will stick around and come back tomorrow. We're not just trying to help get women from A to B on a day-to-day basis, which I'm sure a lot of you, I hope, took the code and took a free ride here to the event, and we'll take a free ride home. Come back and do it again tomorrow. But we're also trying to help advance you up and help break down those barriers and get more women founders and more women entrepreneurs out on the road.
So one thing that seems to be a theme here is the importance of cultural relevance, which is sometimes a hard thing to keep your finger on the pulse of. Where do each of you guys look for inspiration to stay in culture? When you're sometimes in an office, you're often in meetings, you're not, I don't know each of you individually, but I'm not necessarily hanging out with the kids anymore. I don't know, what's cool, you may. But how do you stay inspired, and where do you look for that inspiration?
I can start. So I hired the kids that keep me relevant, and I trust them implicitly, and I give them experiences. So, they're lucky that they get to travel. They go to Fashion Week. I pass them all my invitations to the parties because I have to go home. And then I read voraciously, so that reading has shifted. It used to be that we read magazines, and then I would take a couple, trips to Europe a year. I'd go to LA a few times a year, just getting out there, seeing what people are doing, and not just the big stores. For me, I love going to see what people are starting, and meeting those individuals and talking about what inspired them. So really just being out there. I think you can't just be on Instagram all day and finding your inspiration that way, even though it's very handy, especially late at night. But it really is getting out into the world and being vulnerable and open to walking into that weird store or talking to that person over there. That's how we gather all of our insights, and we actually do internally about 4 big trend reports a year that we share with our teammates too, just to keep everyone eyes wide open, because it's really easy to get into your own world, in your own bubble.
Team MOIC, our first brand commandment is let fun lead, and most of our day is spent acting like kids. So Noria hires them and we act like them. And turning on that mentality, I think that every single one of us could have easily thought of the Museum of Ice Cream because of this. We all have this amazing imagination as a child, and as we get older, society tells us to stop asking questions. It tells us to stop being curious. And at that junction, we're not able to allow, literally, our neurons stop connecting in a way that is allowing this imagination to flow. So if you can put yourself in an environment or space in which you're just so sophomoric, so silly, playing, it really is what I find to be the most sweet spot, no pun intended, for imagination and creativity to foster.
And get out of your bubble. I find I have personal passion points of my own, fashion, style, culture, but I try to read a lot around things that I have nothing to do with, just so I can start to see dots that may not connect, that I can start to think about how those might connect in a really unique and differentiated way. That's also how a lot of subculture happens as well. So trends are really just cyclical, and the mega trends keep coming back around. Try to really understand, like, what's the nuance of the shift of the next one that's coming. For instance, wellness, right? There's been the green juice thing. Now we're going to be talking about mental health. And so I try to really understand, like, what are these trends that are coming back? Who are the people that are talking about them? What's the first book that's going to be published in that space around mental health that no one might be talking about yet? Like, I look for those things that might not yet connect and then think about how might we, as a brand, lean into that space? What could it look like? Can we add value there? If we can, cool, we'll maybe pursue it. If we can't, and it's maybe the time is not right, we'll still be aware of it, defer it, and think about it maybe the next quarter or the next planning cycle.
So Maryellis, you're such an incredible entrepreneur. And we all have our starts. I'm so curious who your first hires were, and then what your most pivotal hire has been.
So Team MYC started day one with 4 people. Scoop, as I call her, she's sitting right there. And we are an extremely nimble team. So our core right now is at 12. And each individual who I hired, they all share this one thing. They fully believe that anything is truly possible, and they have the ambition and wit to wake up every day and make that happen. And my most pivotal hire, I don't think I've hired yet. I think I'm about to hire he, she, it, or they.
And you haven't raised money yet?
No, we're fully self-funded.
So yeah, tell me about that. How have you done that? Because you've opened some really huge spaces and build, even for a team of 12, a massive business, if not everybody here knows. How have you thought about bootstrapping, and would you ever take investment?
So our first build lasted 18 days. It's probably like half the size of this space, and I painted every wall, I built the pool. Gabby and Manish, came in and they ran each and every component of it. And we thought about it in this sense, like, I put every single dollar that I had into this business, and then I got every single credit card that would take my name. And there was a chase on 17th Street that this guy's like, who is this girl? I'm like, I'm starting this ice cream thing. He's like, I can't give you any more lines of credit. And I was like, come on. I was like, can I talk to someone else? And he's like, nope, I'm it. And I was like, okay. And at that junction, it was like, we had this idea, and we had no photos. We sent out a press release, and immediately people just understood what we were trying to do, and they quickly moved on. And then ticket sales have been able to support our builds since that first sale. And in terms of raising capital, we're thinking about it.
Yeah, cool. We can talk about that. So when your brand is immediately recognizable, it's a win. With all that recognition, there inevitably comes scrutiny and sometimes bad press. I've been there. How does your marketing shift to deal with that negative publicity, and do you shift at all? Do you pay attention to it? How do you think about marketing in difficult times?
You have to know your mission so intrinsically, and I think if every day your intention, so ours is to build imagination and human connection for individuals, and if we were to sit and listen to, every reporter or every article that came out, I think it would really be a distraction. So as long as our intentionality is good, we're set. But we do run this, like, we create an environment inside our office and our team that we all fail all the time. But we fail all the time, but we don't make the same mistakes twice. And if you're able to be authentic with, like, hey guys, yeah, we screwed up, and be, open and honest about that, I think it actually, at the end of the day, serves you better. But I wouldn't go, and as soon as publication says one thing, you can't go and respond to them by giving them their asks. You need to stay authentic to who you are.
Have you dealt with that at all?
God, yeah.
Is that for me, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want it?
I guess we can take that one. We had a really public moment where some things happened that were, would say miscoordinated. What was that? The delete Uber moment. And I'm not talking about the Susan Fowler story. We could talk about that. There's been some awesome changes that Uber has made with new leadership. I wouldn't be here and have a job, and a lot of us wouldn't have a job if the company didn't actually truly believe in new leadership and new ways of doing things. So I'm actually super grateful for some of the missteps that the organization has gone through, because they do have such a big responsibility, and it's given the business a chance to understand they do have such a huge role that they need to play in culture, and they need to really stand up as a business and do the right thing, period. And that's really become the new mantra. And so you're right, like we had a positioning that was, I think our mission statement was or transportation as reliable as running water. But now it's pivoted to be much more value-centric, and we talk a lot about do the right thing, period, and that we believe we're here to set the world in motion and to move people closer to opportunity. And so that's really galvanized all of us, and our marketing is now marching to that beat, and the work that we're doing together feels much more coordinated. People feel like they have a bigger vision that's bigger than just transportation and mobility being accessible, that feels like we can all wake up in the morning and work on something that's super near and dear to us, so we want to protect that. And I think that's transformed our culture, it's transformed the way we do work, and hopefully you will continue to see that live out in years and years.
And just to add to that, I would say, because companies, big and small, we do make mistakes, and I went through something earlier this year where it was just like, it's heartbreaking as an individual, but then you're like representing Target, which is like huge. And I would say the thing that I learned the most is how important it is to own your mistakes and communicate ownership and accountability with humility, not defensiveness, because I think too that is what people want to see. They don't want to see the big company like get defensive or kind of like offer like a half-assed, apology for something. It's like own it, take responsibility, communicate what you're going to do to make that better, and move on and continue to communicate with clarity and transparency.
So we've talked a lot about storytelling and marketing, but it's just as important to storytell about our mission and our vision inside of our businesses to our teams. How do you do that and keep motivating your teams to achieve on that mission?
Well,
it's hard.
It's
the hardest.
Well, we've just finished, I wouldn't even say we finished. We went on a really long journey for like a year where we traveled internationally and did a lot of soul searching, and that was through interviews and a lot of listening to understand like what are the values that make up this company? Who are the people driving on the platform, riding on the platform every day? The couriers, how are the cities going through their own transformational change? What has happened to suburban markets, urban markets, when people now can get access to honest, reliable transportation that's available at the press of a button? Like, worlds have changed. And so I think that what we've found is there's so many organic stories that just come out of the community, and we don't actually have to look that hard to find incredible human stories of how lives are being transformed on a day-to-day basis. Earlier this year, we worked with Spike Lee, who is a Brooklynite, and he went out to Brooklyn and cast from the Uber driver partners 5 individuals who have incredible stories of the hustle and grit. And those became 15-minute videos that he produced with us and put them out. And I would say that taught us a big lesson, which is the stories are just here. They're right here within our own community. We can just tap them, and all we really need to do is shine our marketing spotlight on them and let them tell the human story behind the business.
I would add to being super clear on your values as a company or as a brand, knowing what that is, knowing what your mission, your North Star, and managing that expectation, making sure you're hiring people that are sold up for that. You want people who understand yeah, I share those values, and I'm in. And I work with a lot of external people because we would do so many of the collaborations, and it's always making sure up front, do these people share our values? Because otherwise it's going to be a long ass project together, and it's not going to be that much fun. But when you find people who share your values, so for us at Target, it's about bringing the joy of the everyday to all families, and that's our rallying cry. That's always our gut check of wait, are we on that? And sometimes I even find myself wait, I think I've veered too far into my old-fashioned persona or something, and I have to bring myself back. But it is making sure you have everyone around you is a believer. You got to all drink the Kool-Aid, because if not, it's going to cause conflict.
Yeah, and they have to just not drink the Kool-Aid, but they need to know what's inside the Kool-Aid. And I think that for Museum of Ice Cream, our mission is very clear. We want to unite through connection and imagination. So any one of the Team MOIC members, if they want to do literally anything and it fosters or falls under those constructs, the answer is always a hell yes. And giving them the opportunity, but you do need to have some type of guardrail. So the mission needs to be clear, like someone with Noria said. I think it's pinnacle to internally, but it's also super important when you start to work with outside brands, because our first meeting with Target was actually in San Francisco. We were in the middle of production. I hadn't slept in probably 2.5 weeks, and like they're like, Target's coming tomorrow, and I was like, great, grab me our grant. Like I was like, I had nothing prepared. I was like, grab me our brand book and grab me our brand voice. And we had those two things set up, and the first meeting we did, we just walked through what our brand was, and it became so clear that the synergies existed and made the partnership the success that it is.
So this word authenticity is such a buzzword, but it's also a real thing. And we all want to connect with the people and brands we feel get us and share our values. How important is it for a brand to communicate where it stands on social issues? Because you can no longer really stay quiet and remember there was a time where that was okay. And to communicate its values and priorities. And should you ever be afraid of alienating certain customers?
What was that?
You can't be afraid, but like if you have any sense of timidness for going out and saying something, and you know that the repercussion of that might be like slashing half of your audience, then you have to be able to make those leaps and steps. And I think right now we're kind of at this place, like something happens and then we have these opportunities for everyone to kind of get in the bandwagon and say like, oh yeah, I support that or do that. But I think we're gonna even see a grander shift where like you need to start talking about these things way before they happen, and you need to be knowing what those things are, and also picking really strategically what subject matters you guys want to vocalize around, you want to support, because you can't support them all.
And that's why I would say there's one thing to support the issues that you believe in, and I believe all companies need to know exactly what they're standing for. It's a different thing how you communicate it, and I do think, just speaking for a big company that's a publicly traded company, it's really real. Like, you have to go in eyes wide open when you're making a statement and know you might be alienating half your base, and that might impact your sales. For anyone starting a business, it's something to just like understand the pros and the cons and what that's worth to you. Because there's a difference between doing things and then there's also saying things. And so it's just being smart about that and knowing when to speak up for what you truly believe in. But you can every company should always be doing what they believe in.
Yeah, when I've worked at companies that have done this really well, we spend a lot of time talking about who's the monster. I don't know if you've heard this before, but you'll hear a rally cry, like what's the mantra, what are the values, but then what are we fighting? And if you're talking about fighting people in your competitor space, that's usually not the monster. The monster is usually something that puts your values in attack. And so if a brand like Uber is really about democratizing access to movement, then it makes a ton of sense we come out and provide free rides on voting day during the midterm elections so that anybody in transportation deserts can get a ride so they can go vote. So that became a super no-brainer, and that took like 2 weeks to throw that up to the CEO office and get it done. Then there's certain things that we're still, like, as a big business, we're at a different life cycle in our development where maybe a non-incumbent or a very new category entrant is at, and so they can probably take more risks, where a big established brand has to pick things that might be more resonant with a larger group of individuals, which I would say is why you'll see Uber do work like Ride the Vote, why we support Meals on Wheels, why we're supporting a lot of social impact causes, because we want to use the technology to create, more inroads for cities and create access for individuals at scale. So that's social impact is like paramount. And if you're trying to sell to Gen Zs, it's going to be even more, because I think 9 in 10 demand it from the companies that they spend their dollars with.
And so a lot of us talk about like mental health and how much we use our phones, and I'm curious, Maryellis, I'm not sure if you've considered taking phones out of the experience. Are you taking phones out of the experience? I feel like there's maybe a trend that will lead toward that in some of these experiential businesses.
I feel genuinely responsible. I think that the rate at which we're using technology today is it's so much more harmful than we're aware of, and we need to put an end to it. So actually it was last week in San Francisco, I flew out and we gave everyone a free day if they just came to the Museum of Ice Cream and they checked their phones at the door. And I got back on the plane and wrote my team an email, and it said this: it was the best experience and day we've had thus far. No one was sitting there taking Instagram photos. We had the highest level of connectivity. I did a a ghost tour. So I just went in as an individual, and there's this mom and daughter that was visiting from New Zealand, and they had just walked by. They're like, hey, I know you guys are sold out, whatever, I can't get tickets, but what can I do? And we're like, hey, actually today we're doing this thing. You just have to give your phone at the door and you can come in for free. Afterwards, the mom and daughter, they sent me an email. The group was just so engaged with one another, and the experience that they had was invaluable, and we have to start thinking about this, and I do not think phones nor social media is going to be the answer, especially in the experiential space. So yes, not only are we thinking about it, we're actually working on doing it, and I think that is definitely the direction we're going in.
That's amazing. That's a big risk to take, right? Because that's your largest marketing channel.
And we're ready for it, which is the most exciting piece.
I think we're ready for it.
Is everyone ready for no phones?
I don't see that many phones. Cool.
Can I ask one more question to you guys too? Will you be okay if you can walk away and maybe not have the Instagram post?
Cool. So we don't have to decorate this next time, is that?
Easy consumer testing right here. Thank you guys. And ladies.
So Noria, how do you leverage the appeal of influencers so that the content doesn't feel sponsored and rather feels like a brand extension? That's a really hard thing to do when you are marketing something.
It's so hard, and I can't say that we're like, I'm figuring it out. I feel like when influencer marketing came to me last year, it was because my CMO was like, you're gonna be taking over influencer marketing. And I was like, oh, I hate it. And because I felt like it was like, oh, it's just posing, it's not real, like there's not true stories, and to my delight, there actually is really good storytelling out there. So we're figuring it out, and I will say, like, as a big company that's used to like doing ad campaigns, we run into a lot of people who are like, okay, here's my TV ad, and can you just find me like 10 people to like be in it, and then maybe post this thing, and here's the priorities for the product. So if you could just have them do that, that'd be perfect. And that, to me, is not the power of influence. Influence is what we're trying to connect into, and it really has to be something that is emotional. And I call it, authenticity is really important. I call it the realness. Like, I look for people who are interesting individuals who have a true connection to Target that makes sense to my brand that I'm representing. And then we are changing the way that we do it so that we're not like, oh, here's these like, I don't know, skinny jeans, can you just put them on and like make sure there's no other brands in there? We're telling them like, here's what we're about, here's what we want to stand for, go make the content and then come back and like let us know how it goes. How can we support you? What else do you need from us? And like more trying to support the editorial process of making that content and being a true collaborative partner versus a media partner. We want to move away from being media and to more about being a true collaborator, which is where we're headed.
Cool. So you guys are such, I mean, you're all marketers, you're all brilliant marketers, and we all want to be brilliant marketers. And you probably know and employ a lot of brilliant marketers. So what do you think are the traits of a great marketer? What does it take?
I'll start because we don't have a marketing team, but we're about to hire one. So I can tell you what we're looking for. Anyone wants to go into marketing space, please?
Who wants to work for her?
Yeah, let me know.
Okay.
All the jobs are up on our website. I'm looking for dynamic storytellers, people that can understand what we're doing at all points of capacities and be able to transcribe that in a meaningful way that can live on various platforms. And that's kind of what I've been in the search for, kind of like on LinkedIn every day, looking for those storytellers.
I'm actually looking for a director of influencer marketing, if anybody would like to apply. But what I look for is someone who is not only creative and looks broadly across culture and design and art and has just possesses a natural curiosity about the world, but also has the other half of the brain that understands business, understands the needs of a business, because it's really fun to go make stories, but when you're in the service of a business that does rely on sales at the end of the day, it's how to connect the two. And I've learned to love that. I came in as a fashion editor to Target. I had no idea about marketing. I've never been trained in marketing. I didn't know any of like the acronyms, and I still hate words like KPI. But what I understood was, wow, I can use the power of creativity and thoughtfulness, and then you said earlier, like connecting dots like this to serve the needs of a business, to think strategically, and that's been one of the great joys of my experience coming into Target, and that's when I meet marketers that I love these days. It's not like they don't come from this long history of marketing. they're actually have these really varied, interesting backgrounds, and they intrinsically understand the power of connection and communication in new ways.
I think I agree on all of that. And also try to not be a marketer. Just try to pretend you're not a marketer. What do I mean by that?
That word is terrible.
I mean, it is. It's bad. But what I am trying to articulate in that is don't come with a preconceived notion of how a campaign needs to look and what an advertising campaign looks like. I mean, the market's constantly changing. Curiosity, be hungry, be voraciously looking for things you can connect in interesting ways. But then you got to be good at that double-sided storytelling, which means how can you tell a story to a consumer in a way that's going to connect to their heart and mind, and then how can you sell that back into the organization, because all they really talk about mostly is the dollars, the KPIs, how you're going to move the sales units this year. So you have to be able to translate what's the business problem into what's the consumer problem that they're going to care about, and be able to tell both sides of that story.
Cool. So we have some time for Q&A from the audience. I'm guessing there's microphones running around. Are there microphones? Yes. Okay, so raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Here.
Oh.
Are you guys calling? Oh, there's a line. Is there a line?
She just gave me the mic.
Okay, got it.
So can I ask a question since she gave me the mic?
All right.
I'm always asking questions. My name is Pasha Cook, brand consultant for minority pro athletes and entrepreneurs. So I have a two-part question I always do. First of all, you talked about failing for your company, right? Your ice cream company. And so my question to you would be, how do you get your employees to buy into failing forward, that's what I call it, and embracing the process of growth, and not buy into the world of instant gratification that is so prevalent today? So that's the first question. The second question is for Uber, for Erika. How do you see storytelling in the digital space growing and changing in the future to draw a more authentic connection to your employees and customers when the bottom line is more measurable than the storytelling?
You fail, the fail piece, so you lead by example. My team watches me every day fail, and I tell the story. They understand that I'm not always successful. There's things that I do on every day's occasion that don't work, and you translate that. And then you also give them the platform and space to fail. So we don't have KPIs in our brand. We don't actually look at, our bottom line is how many connections to humans can we have. We're not looking at dollar signs, we're looking at points of human to human connection. And then we give them the space. So their jobs are measured on their ability to create and to seek out our mission. And I think it gives that environment so they're like, okay, we can try it, and if it doesn't work, great. Let's try something else.
And if I articulate your question right, it sounds like you're asking what's the measurable business impact behind digital storytelling, and how are we doing that? Yeah. Got it. I think in the future, so your question is, how is storytelling going to change in the future to both your internal customers and your external customers? I think what you're going to see is less around saying and more around doing, and it's actually going to be the product pipeline that's going to be the new marketing vehicle. And what do I mean by that? We're going to have to make experiences and products that are embedded in the app specifically that are going to be that thing that's going to do the marketing heavy lifting for us. I want to say it was a couple years ago that we saw a Fearless Girl be a statue, and nobody was really talking about out-of-home. Nobody was really talking about, physical structures in the way that they're doing advertising, and that became the number one most talked about phenomenon that generated a ton of earned media, which means they didn't write the check for it. They got it for free because they did something so cool, people wanted to evangelize it. I think that's what you're going to see more and more of. And then same thing for employees. I think you're going to need to create internal experiences that are going to help employees also better understand the business and how the business moves internally. And we do things called workation, which means you can go off and work in a different part of the company, go work on a piece of the business, come up with a business plan, and then when you bring that back into the role that you had previously left, we then get to work on how we implement it. So I think you're going to see that innovation of storytelling happen both on how we're structuring jobs and how we're structuring roles and briefs and projects, as well as what are we developing in the actual product.
Cool, so I had called on you up here in the pink blazer, and I just want to make sure that you have a chance to ask your question. Introduce yourself first and tell us where you're from.
Stand. Can I sit?
What?
I'll stand.
Yeah, stand.
Okay.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Morgan Hutchinson, the founder of Buru. I live in Los Angeles. 2 kids. They're very much a part of our brand, and it's all about the mom life. And because of that, this is kind of going back to the Instagram, I'm exhausted by the fact that sometimes I feel I'm missing out so that I can document this part that tells the story of our clothing brand. And I just want to know, for you, with this very visual, amazing experience, how will you transfer your marketing efforts if you don't allow the phones in there to take the incredible pictures? Like, just...
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
But I'm not worried about it. I think so if you think about the context of what social media is doing is like, it's giving an endorsement, right? But the fact of the matter is, like, we're scrolling through thousands of so-called endorsements every day. But the difference if Noria came up to me after this panel and was like, Maryellis, have you gone to this place? It was so amazing. That is worth 10 million X than me seeing Noria at that same place on Instagram. So if we're able to build the bonds of a community and have that spread in a way that's organic because you had an authentic experience, I think we're going to be kicking ass. And on your first part, like, I take a lot of science. So I have 2 psychologists and 1 scientist that's really helping me build and design the rhetoric around our next projects and around Museum of Ice Cream. And like, there's just some facts. So as soon as you take a photograph, like, I'm going to take a photograph, so I'm going to remember this experience or this thing, your brain automatically offboards that information and saying this other third-party device is now taking that storage, and so your brain actually doesn't remember the event. So I kind of just, you take those small pieces and you're like, it's gonna be okay. And the last piece I'll answer to that, every week we do a Team MOIC challenge, and last week we all did, who's turned on screen time on their iOS device? Yeah? So we did a challenge in the office, and everyone was monitoring their screen time from Instagram and whatnot. And what we realized is, like, the question I probed to them was, like, what else could we be doing in that time we're spent scrolling? And the answers are so remarkable. And when you start doing those things, I think we're going to see that shift even catastrophe even larger.
Right here, or maybe, yeah, right here in the black.
I have a question. So my question for you all is, as women in leadership, right, do you feel that you've gotten colder? As women, usually we're supposed to be soft or whatever. But do you feel like you've gotten colder, and then how do you navigate that space by, like, being more direct? And I guess that's what I mean by coldzero. Or how do you navigate that space?
That's an awesome question. When I started at Target, I'd come from the magazine world, and I landed, and I was like, I'm on a different planet. Like, it just was, and it was still a very corporate environment, like they still wore suits. And I was so overwhelmed. One of the things that I found to be incredible was that I realized very quickly, you do not need to be like them in order to be effective. I know what my strengths were, so I had a whole executive coach. Like, the companies that want to invest in women leadership, they really do invest. And I had someone who really had to coach me through that first year, probably so that I wouldn't run away. But I found, in fact, that my leadership style, which naturally is more nurturing and more open, and I don't speak very formally, I even curse in meetings, that it was connecting with people in a way that they hadn't felt connected to in a long time. And it's strange, consistently my team comes back as one of the happiest teams at Target, and I think that it is because they feel a true connection. And so if there's anything that I would advise is to never change, like, who you are to be that colder person. If anything, what I've developed, the coldness or the hardness, is I have much more tolerance or endurance for very difficult situations. And that inner strength is something I've developed, but I haven't let it impact how I outwardly communicate.
Yeah. Anybody a little further back here with the lace sleeve? That's been a very enthusiastic arm. Is it lace? It's floral.
Sheer. Okay, first of all, I'm a big fan of, like, all of you. Noria, I've been following you
since Lucky, since before there was Instagram. I was like a huge fan. And Uber, I'm from El Paso, Texas, and you guys featured my city and Khalid, and thank you for that. That was amazing. My question is about meetings. And I'm in the automotive marketing space, and I want to know how you guys are putting together compelling meetings. Like what you're doing that's different, because just being here, I feel like I'm like in a business meeting, like with you guys, like just learning, taking notes. But I want to know, like, what are you guys doing in meetings? Is it like no phones at the table? Like, are they short meetings? Is everybody invited? Like, how are you guys doing? How are you putting together your compelling meetings?
Probably the most valuable question of the day, because it's just like we spend so much time doing it, and it's so important to optimize our time.
We run our walkout policy. So if you don't have a voice, an understanding, and an actual action in that project, you stand up and you walk out.
Yeah.
It's expensive. It's expensive to put people in meetings, right? It's the company's time. You put a bunch of executives in a meeting, it's like so much money, and it's a lot of the time it's very duplicative, right?
Totally.
I mean, if you're gonna take someone's time, don't waste it. We really try to establish what's the agenda up front, and we'll say it in our body of the meeting. It'll be, what is the purpose of this meeting and what is the desired outcome? And I'm looking at Landon because we have been doing this for years. And if you don't have that in the agenda, I'm not going. And then if you really need to have a meeting, a lot of meetings are a waste of time is also what I find.
Oh, it's like you're reporting out, you're just reading metrics.
Right, and so I'd say try to really understand what's the development process. Try to spend time upfront as a team talking about what's the role of this project, how is it gonna get scoped out, whose job is what. And so you can map out those milestones so each meeting only has the critical people there, and that way people don't feel left out, like, why am I not in that meeting? They recognize, well, that's really just to review this piece. You don't come in until production. So make sure you have that mapped out so people don't feel that FOMO that they're not in the room.
And also make sure, practice, like really people who can run a good meeting not only have like the outcome they want to get, but they see when things are going off the rails and they're like, okay, bring it back in, people. Like drives me crazy. This is a Minnesota thing and it's really cute, but it's also super annoying, is that they talk for about like nothing for like the first 10 minutes. It's like nice stuff. Like we just talk about our families, the weekend, like what you ate for lunch. And as a New Yorker in the room, I'm always like, oh my God, I love you guys. Please, let's get to point number one. And I think it's like, it's knowing in the meeting, people who run good meetings are aware, like they're surveying the room constantly, and sometimes I bring people in with me on my team just to nudge me if like they're like, no, bring it back together. Like, let's make sure you get what you need out of this 30 minutes, because truly you should be able to achieve anything in 30 minutes and under.
So I have one last question, and it's gonna be super brief, and it's a question I ask on my podcast all the time. We're kind of short on time, but what does success mean to each of you right now? In one sentence.
Going home to watch Netflix with Tom and hanging out with our cat.
Success for us looks like solving loneliness in the world.
It's right now. It's time with my family, 100%.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you for being here.